Hello, good afternoon. It's Adil Fazal here, market analyst at CFDs.com. Be sure to visit the website www.cfds.com for your trading needs and certainly qualify for that potential new account bonus offer. Alternatively, you can visit the educational site www.cfds.education to certainly learn more. Okay, let's try and decipher exactly what's happening here, folks. As always, we look at the Asian markets first of all. Nikkei negative, down 200 odd points. The Hang Seng certainly down 200, and the Shanghai was probably the only shining outstanding index, up by 1%. So interesting. Okay, so China, in terms of economic data overnight, US markets certainly still stage an impressive rally, certainly pushed higher, although they are now into resistance. Now, as I speak, the S&P futures are trading at 1905. So let's just project those futures and see exactly where the support and resistance would be. Let's bring up a chart of the S&P 500 here. Okie dokie, right. So we have resistance at 1898 on the S&P 500. Then we have resistance at 1907. Okay, and then we have resistance at 1916 and then 1927. Now, given the fact that the Nikkei was negative overnight, that will obviously have a negative or a bearish impact on the actual indices or sentiment itself. Although this morning, European markets certainly have improved to put in a stellar bounce. Now, also with regards to Nasdaq as well, we did have solid resistance here in this zone at 4100. Obviously, that's failed to transpire, and this market is now looking at the potential next resistance at 4170. That's the next potential resistance zone. Although you do have resistance here on the Nasdaq at 4140, okay, and you have that fib 75% resistance at 4122, okay, and that certainly will come into the equation as well. So 4120 zone certainly will be solid resistance on the Nasdaq itself. Now you do have unfilled gaps left behind, and again that will be a cause of major concern. And you also have this bearish trend line coming into play too, okay, with regards to the Nasdaq itself, which will indicate a risk aversion trade. Okay, so from my perspective, you certainly are into a risk off mode. Now, in terms of news flow this morning, we have had machinery orders certainly weaker overnight from Japan. In terms of the UK average earnings, wage growth certainly has slowed and therefore is bearish. CPI certainly came in weaker than expected on a year-on-year basis in the Eurozone, although the actual CPI on a January perspective, it certainly, or harmonized CPI slightly came out slightly stronger. Construction data certainly came out weaker in the Eurozone again. ZEW expectations certainly came out weaker. Now all eyes remain on the US data, which is due out shortly. We have mortgage applications, housing starts, building permits, PPI, okay, Red Book, and industrial production, although we do have the big harbinger will be the FOMC minutes and obviously the new crude oil data or inventories data as well. We do have a potential meeting ongoing at present with regards to the I think it's Russia, potentially Russia, I think, from what I can understand. And certainly there is news flow coming out of the potential OPEC meeting. Now, the latest tweet, if I can recollect correctly, IFX reported Russia hopes Iran freeze. So basically, it's all about hope, on the hope of Iran potentially freezing and joining in on the potential freeze on the oil supply. But that certainly looks very, very unlikely. Okay, so let's look at the actual technical setup now on the European stocks. Okay, so looking at the weekly chart of Euro stocks, we still are in that bearish red candle. We are trading within that red candle, and therefore bias remains bearish. Looking at the daily chart now, you are now approaching the previous support equals resistance, as you can see here. Previous support equals resistance in that 2870 zone, and you are coming up to that upper channel resistance, and therefore the bearish trend still remains intact on the Euro stocks. Now, 60-minute chart, the Euro stocks itself, you are coming into that previous support equals resistance, although you have broken through the 2850 to 2860 zone, so certainly impressive. The next potential zone could be the 2900 level, but given the fact that the Euro USD, and this is one of the most important aspects here, if I bring up the chart of the Euro, you can see, if I bring up the 60-minute chart, you will see that the Euro now is into support, and therefore whenever the Euro is into support, we all know the market's going to a risk aversion mode. So it's very, very important to understand that aspect. Okay, now Going on and moving on into the German DAX now. German DAX also, if I bring up the weekly chart, certainly remains bearish, still into that within that red candle. Daily chart itself remains bearish because previous support equals resistance, and you are into that 50% resistance as well. Okay, 60-minute chart of the German DAX. Again, you can see we're in that zone of previous support equals resistance, and we have 1, 2, 3 unfilled gaps left below. The more unfilled gaps we have left below, the more the attraction or price action will attract towards it, and therefore take that into consideration. 10-minute chart, German DAX, yes, we've taken out that pivot high that was posted on the 16th, so very impressive. Whether or not we can consolidate above that pivot high, or we retrace back down to that potential gap fill region. So again, certainly keep an eye out the price action there. Okay, but with regards to euro being into support, and we've had weaker data as well throughout the day. Nikkei down overnight, Hang Seng down overnight. It certainly is, from my perspective, in a risk aversion mode. Okay, going over to the French CAC now. Let's see the French CAC situation. Okay, so bringing up a daily chart first of all. You are into that upper channel resistance, in that fib 50 to 61% resistance on the French CAC. Bringing up a 60-minute chart now. You are into the 200 MA. You did have support, previous support equals resistance, but that certainly has been taken out. And all obviously focus lies on that 200 MA, acting as potential resistance for the French indices. 10-minute chart, the French CAC at the moment, we certainly seem to be meandering. No real movement here thus far, although the RSI certainly is overbought and certainly is indicating a potential top. So again, all eyes on that zone 2. Okay, now bringing up a chart of the FTSE 100. This has been the outstanding performer today, and that was mainly led by the miners. Okay, now we are into that fib 75% resistance, so this zone here at the 5960 zone is absolutely crucial. 5960 is solid resistance. Fib 75%. If you do take that out, then you are looking at testing that 6,000 level, which will be very, very impressive. Now, given the fact that the Iranians have not come on board yet, Russian version says hopes not, thinks, quote, is Russia thinks Iran will agree to joint agreement freezing oil by January. Okay, so Russia thinks that. Okay, that's what they're basically presuming. Mortgage applications actually come out weaker. US MBA mortgage plus 8.2%. Okay, so again, it's going to be interesting. Now, the weekly chart of the FTSE itself certainly has put in a bullish engulfing candle. Certainly looks very promising here. Going back to the daily chart, like I said, we are into resistance. Given the fact that we've had this stellar rally from 5,500 now to 5,950, so almost a 450 point rally without a single retracement, without a single pullback, is very, very impressive, folks. And you are now due to potential looking at exhaustion, okay, on the FTSE 100. 60-minute chart, the FTSE, you are into that horizontal resistance zone. If we do take this out, the next level will be 6,000, then 650, 6050. So very, very impressive. 10-minute chart of the FTSE itself, again, remains severely, from my perspective, severely overbought. If I look at the pivot points as well, if I bring up the pivots, here we go. If you look at the pivot points, that if I were to obviously put them on, and you can see that we are into that pivot R3 resistance. So again, this is absolutely crucial in terms of a reversal on the FTSE 100. And certainly does remain overbought from literally almost every angle. Now, if I bring up the chart of the individual sectors on the FTSE, let's just see if I can bring up the banking stocks first of all. You will see on the daily chart, you can see that we are in that diagonal trend line resistance. If you take the pivot high, connect it to the next pivot, and you can see that we are now into that resistance zone. Okay, so lower lows and lower highs on the FTSE 100. Let's have a look at the mining stocks, which have been quite stellar today, and the financials. Bring up the miners. Bear with me. Okay, it's not here at the moment. Let's bring up FTSE mining. Okay, FTSE mining, FTSE oil. There we go, FTSE oil and gas. Okay, right. So let's just bring this up. Let's just save this as well whilst we're at it. Okay, so if I bring up the, you can see from the 60-minute chart, we certainly have put in a topping tail looking at potentially reversing. If I bring up the daily chart, you can see that we are into that horizontal resistance zone, and that's certainly signaling to you that oil is certainly potentially going to be weaker. Okay, certainly giving you a heads up there. Let's bring up the chart of the miners as well. So oil and gas. Bring up the daily chart here. We certainly have observed that. Oil and gas banks. Oh, here we go, mining. Okay, so the mining sector certainly has been very impressive, certainly pushed higher, and that's all led to Glencore, so bear that in mind. Although we are now coming into resistance where previous support equals resistance, so therefore the FTSE itself overall is into resistance and certainly remains weak, okay, and certainly looking for weaker prices. So that's the way in which I'm interpreting things at present. Okay, that's where I expect this market to go. Okay, so I think that's a sum up or summation. Okay, in terms of the actual European indices, the conclusion is that we are now into resistance, especially given the DAX being into previous support equals resistance. Okay, and therefore you are looking at that 50% to potentially hold, and the euro to certainly start to appreciate from here. Again, all eyes on the US data deluge and how that impacts the market. Although yesterday's economic data out of the US wasn't exactly strong. Okay, right. I think that's a market wrap. Be sure to visit cfds.com for your trading needs. Expect weakness going into the US session at 1905, and on the S&P and the Nasdaq, that 4120 zone will be solid resistance. Goodbye now.